Today we are very happy to have Davide Ticchi at the GrowthChat from the Marche Technical University in Ancona, Italy. Davide got his PhD in 2004 at the University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and he and I met first time, I guess, a decade ago, but I don't remember exactly. And we will be talking about Davide's paper that's called Forbidden Fruits, the Political Economy of Science, Religion and Growth. And that paper is forthcoming in a Review of Economic Studies. And given the topic of religion, science and growth, today Marco picked a different background, which shows the Vatican in Italy. So Davide, welcome. We are happy that you are here.
Thank you, Sascha. Thank you, Marco, for inviting us. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Wonderful. So your paper is motivated by history, by long-run processes of how the state, the church, and the population interact. And maybe you could tell us why you think that science and religion have to do with growth.
Yes. Well, I think that you basically want to go to the question of why economists should care about studying religion. I mean, this is the essence. And when you go to answer to this question, I mean, that seems that many people sometimes ask, especially outside the profession. Well, the answer is easy. Religion is a set of beliefs of individuals that affect our behavior, I mean, our choices. So, for example, this kind of belief affect our consumption choices, affect the way we decide about our private life and about eventually our fertility. They can affect our education choices. They affect whether how we interact with the other. Do we trust others or not? I mean, they affect economic outcomes. They affect many economic outcomes. And the point is, at that point, this answer the question is why an economist wants to study the effect of religion on economic variables. And the economic variable, the economic issue that we care most is economic growth. Because if you have, when we talk about economic growth, we talk about income per capita of individuals that grow over time. So even though in the last year we had a big shock to our incomes, well, the fact that our income has grown so much over the last decades allows us to say that our standard of living has not changed very much. So growth is the most important thing, I think, in economics. And therefore, we want to understand how religion affects economic growth. Now, when we go to economic growth as economists, we know is determined by innovation. Income grow if we are more productive, if we produce more, each individual every year produce more, and this comes from innovations that can be innovations of product or new product. For example, here we could cite, given the time where we are, a new product, which is the vaccine for COVID. So at the end, we grow if we innovate. But it's not only about innovation, it's about also adopting innovation. And of course, science is necessary to have innovations. And of course, innovation is a broad issue. It's not only innovation of product or innovation of new technology to produce things, but it's also innovation about how we organize our society, for example. So at the end, innovation is key, and religion may affect science and innovation. So this is the reason why we have studied this link between science and innovation.
That's fascinating. I read the paper and I imagine there was a lot of work behind trying to understand and trying to connect innovation and religion. I know that you guys created this model. Is there any chance you can explain us, like in very simple words, how the model worked and how did you use it?
Okay, I'll try. At least, I mean, let's look at the ingredients. The ingredient is that we build a model where there are, I mean, there is a society by four groups. People differ by the level of income and their beliefs, let's say religious beliefs. So they can be rich and poor, or or they can be religious or secular, or not religious. So we have four groups. We have religious rich, religious poor, and we have secular rich and secular. So we have four groups, and these four groups, they have to elect their representatives. They have to elect a government, and the government decides taxes and how to employ the public revenue, the government revenue. The government can provide some simple redistribution, so money to good people, or the government may provide what we call a religious public, namely a public good that is liked by religious people. One can think to tax exemption or subsidies to the religious authorities, but I mean, we have an extension of the model where we show that one can think also to some regulations and laws that are more in line with the religious beliefs. Things, all the story about abortion laws, about the eventually stem cells, or things like this. So think about this religious public good. That's something that provides utility that those that are religious, but not to people who are not religious. So this is, I mean, the first thing, the first ingredient. The second ingredient is that there are innovations that comes during the time, and these innovations can be, let's say, of two types. One type of innovation is, let's say, belief neutral, has no effect on religious beliefs. One type of innovation can instead erode innovation. Can erode innovation because, for example, belief eroding innovation can erode a religious belief. And this erosion of religious belief is due to the fact that this kind of scientific innovations are not, let's say, are in contrast with the precept of the church of the religious authority. So the government has to decide whether to allow such kind of innovations or to block this kind of innovation. At the same time, we have another actor, which is, we call it the church, but it's religious authority. Is nothing in our paper related to a specific religion. So our paper is about religiosity, the level of religiosity. So we call it church. Explaining is, let's say, a religious authority, whatever is this authority. And this authority has the capacity of, we call it repairing the beliefs, namely to reinterpret the, let's say, the religious precept in a way to make it consistent with this scientific innovation or new innovation that we have. But this is costly, so it has to decide whether to do it or not. Then what happens? It happens that for intermediate level of religiosity, it is optimal for the religious authority to make this repairing. But this is not optimal when religiosity in the population is very high or very low. When it's very low, it's simple. People don't care about religion, so they just say, why should I make an effort to change my, let's say, my precept, and things like this. When religiosity is very high, then it's very costly because you have very religious people, you have taught them certain things, they are more, let's say, rigid, so it's costly to change. For intermediate level, instead, this might be optimal. And this is the first ingredient. So repairing happens for intermediate level of religiosity now. Then the government has to decide whether to block or not the innovation. And it turns out that blocking, of course, for the government is costly because, and the cost is that you forego the benefit of innovation, which is higher income. So every government, whoever it represents, rich or poor, doesn't like blocking, okay? But at the same time, it has also to consider the effect it has in the future. So if you let an innovation, of course, innovations that are belief neutral are always implemented, but those innovations that affect the religious beliefs, then, of course, if you allow them, then you change their level of religiosity in the society, and then when you go to the next election, let's say, then new groups of coalition can emerge. So the problem for the government is if I allow the innovation, belief changes, and then other groups may may win the next elections. And for this reason, sometimes government blocks. And what we obtain that is that blocking in our model take place for, let's say, relatively high levels of religiosity, especially at low level of development.
Okay. And then in your paper, you describe 3 types of regimes that you observe in the world and that you label. Maybe you could give us a pitch of that aspect.
I mean, we obtain that we can summarize in 3 types of regime. I mean, one of this regime is what we call the European regime, okay? The Europe. Europe is a regime where the level of religiosity is low, and therefore what we get is that here there is no blocking, but at the same time there is also, I mean, innovation. Every type of innovation is implemented. Religiosity is low, is Europe, okay? So no blocking, no given that, because religiosity is low, but given that religiosity is low, there is also no repairing. Okay? This is Europe. Then there is intermediate level of religiosity where that we call the American regime. We call it the American regime because US has a higher level of religiosity relative to Europe, but still in the US you have an innovative campus, and somehow this avoiding, let's say, blocking, we will come back to this, but let's say you can avoid blocking because the religious authorities, the church, make the effort of making innovation and religion compatible. They, let's say, repair the damages of new innovation. So there is an active process by the church, by the religious authority to make this compatible. Then there is a high level of religiosity that we call the theocratic regime. And this theocratic regime is the one that characterizes part of, let's say, the Arab world, Muslim countries, where religiosity is very high and where religious authority are very powerful, and then innovations is substantially blocked when it is against the precept, the ideas, the beliefs of the religious. Okay, these are the 3 regimes. And basically, this leads also to a negative relationship between innovation and religiosity, because you have that at middle, intermediate levels, you don't block innovation, but when you have very high levels of innovations, then religious leaders may be tempted to block those innovations that may change religious beliefs.
I'm actually surprised to hear that United States is more religious than Europe. Coming from Italy, it's just, you know, we're surrounded by churches and stuff. How did you collect the data? What sort of data did you use? Because you're putting together religion, innovations, and like different continents. So what sort of data did you collect here?
The first set of data is an international cross-country. So we have used two sources of data, mainly two sources, I mean, many sources of data. I mean, it was, I mean, technically was a simple work technically, but combining was very time consuming. The first is the World Value Survey integrated by the European Value Survey. This was useful to get the religiosity data. I mean, the survey goes from 1980 to 2010. There are 6 waves of the World Value Survey and 4 for the European Value Study. And we get 5 measures of religiosity, whether people is the share of, for each country, we have the share of individuals that define themselves as a religious person, those that believe in God, those that goes to church at least once in a week, those that think that religion is important or that God is very important. Okay, so this is the 5 measure shares in the population. Then our variable of interest is innovation, and one measure of innovation is patents by residents, patents per capita. So we have taken from WIPO the number of patents by residents, standardized with the population, and this is our variable that we look at. Of course, then there are a number of controls at country levels to make sure that we control for the level of GDP, for population, for many other variables, and we get this negative relationship at, let's say, the world level, okay, for various countries in the world. One can say, look, these countries are different, and you can not control for all the variables that affect innovations and religiosity. So we found some data for the United States. I mean, it was a survey in 2007 asking if in the 51 states, some variables about religiosity, basically very similar to those that I already cited. And in these states, we have the number of patents. So we replicated the same thing and found this, that the negative relationship between innovation and religiosity was also at US level, also inside the United States, which somehow tells us that this is more convincing. And if I can say one more, I take the opportunity to advertise another paper, sure, which is very related to this one. It is a byproduct of this paper we published in the American Economic Review, the Papers on Proceedings of 2015, and the title is Religion and Innovation. And was that paper take a different perspective and say, look, religiosity of people may not be important for innovation only because it goes in the political system, but also because affect the individual attitudes toward innovation. Okay, so we took, given that the data of the World Survey are at the individual level, we took this data. I mean, we consider these variables of religiosity, and we look to some other characteristics of the individuals. For example, I mean, there were 11 characteristics of attitude towards innovations, and that we divided in three categories: attitude towards science and technologies, attitude toward new ideas, change, and risk taking, and what child qualities, what is important for you that your child has. So what we got at the individual level for these countries around the world was, again, people that are more religious, have less favorable view towards innovation. So another potential channel through which religiosity affects innovation is the attitudes of individuals towards innovation.
Wonderful. So your main paper is pretty long, more than 100 pages in the version I saw, and it's a lot theory focused. So you have an elaborate model that you described so beautifully of how the political process lets these different institutions interact. But then your empirical findings, both in that big paper and in the spin-off, is that those predictions are borne out in the data, that indeed there is this link that you that is a key ingredient in your model. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you. The paper is very long, I mean, and is around from a long time. It was a project that we started in 2008. Okay. And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it started from 2008, and basically it was presented in the first form 2009 at the MBR Summer Institute. But then, I mean, we realized that the idea was good, but we wanted to do something really, you know, as I described the model, you have many actors, you know, and combining all the things with the rigorous theory, that was difficult. And also when we presented them, people ask, you know, the religious public good is, I don't believe is much important, it's more about laws. Then you make an extension about laws. And, you know, this explains why you find all these extensions. It was,
so you are now talking also a bit about the production process, how research is done. So what kept you motivated in these 12 years that you were working on this one big thing?
Well, let's say that at the beginning, the motivation was that we realized we had a very good idea. We thought it was good. And the reactions when we presented the paper was very good. So we realized that the paper was innovative. Okay, it's not often that you get ideas that innovate very much. So we thought to have an important idea, and we wanted to do a paper, to do a model to explain this kind of things in a rigorous manner, and obtaining also predictions or results that make sense. So, and technically speaking, even though you don't, maybe they are hidden in the appendix, there are very challenging stuff in solving, for example, the solution of a political process with 4 groups that have to decide about 3 policy variables and those kind of things. That gets very complicated. So the motivation at the beginning was this, and then at the end the motivation was, well, we have all this work done. Okay, the paper is successful somehow, at least what we got very. So we have to publish well. And
let's push it a little bit more to get like
this is the reason. I mean.
So you're not an economic historian, are you? Like you just started.
No,
like,
no.
How do you classify yourself?
Well, I would like to classify as an economist.
General label. Yeah, tell us about a little bit of your story. Like, what brought you to do research in this topic, choose this topic and in this field?
Well, I would start why I become an economist. I mean,
that's a good question, actually.
I think that this is, if I start from that, then you understand. I mean, because I went to the university, I mean, I did a high school, a technical school. So I was supposed to be an engineer, okay? So a mechanical engineer. But then I didn't like to go in a firm 8 hours a day. I mean, I like to study. Okay, so I decided to go to do economics, but not economic, business. I like business, and maybe I said, well, maybe then I have the option. I thought in terms of option values of becoming a professor, but maybe having a firm, a studio, or something like this. I mean, it was the concept of studying and freedom, but business. So studying first year, doing, you know, accounting, private law, and those things. And at the end of the first year, there was this exam, microeconomics. Okay, so couldn't understand well what microeconomics was. So you start opening the book, and so there was consumption choices, and then the firm, the various oligopoly, monopoly, and offer. And then, given that I had this a bit love for math, I found it easy, could understand very well. And I found these tools very powerful to understand the world. So at the end, after having done economics, I said, well, I would like to do this kind of things. And then I took the major in economics. And this was the reason why I decided to study economics. So I always say to my students that they should study economics, even though they want to be a businessman or to do something else, because economics allows them to understand the world. At the beginning, I mean, what I enjoyed more was studying economics, and with what I learned, use it to understand the world. Also to understand, I wouldn't say the people, but the behavior of the people, okay? And that was a lot of fun. If you understand economics as very powerful tools, think about game theory. And so this was what motivated me to study economics. Then the reason why I became an economist was I like research, studying, and then I found the right field. Okay, but this was consequent. And then why I ended up in this kind of things was a coincidence. The beginning, my first paper, if you go in to some years back, let's say 15, 20 years, you find some paper, my first paper was on investment under uncertainty. And that was easy because I was in Italy. I had a very good professor, okay? Because before, Sascha said that I took the PhD at Pompeo Fabra, but before that, I took the PhD at the University of Ancona, actually where I now teach, okay? But
going back.
from Urbino, yeah, I had this professor, Enrico Saltari, who was, I mean, the professor that at the beginning, I was a student, I worked with him, and so I said, look, I have to do this thesis for the Italian PhD, okay? What are you doing? Can you give me something interesting to study? Can you follow me? And then he said, oh, yes, I mean, I'm doing this kind of things. So I studied investment under uncertainty, and then we ended up also to collaborate, also to write some good stuff. But then while I was in Barcelona, I started liking, it was a coincidence actually. I went to a seminar, and there was a paper by Perotti about the effect of the electoral systems on economic outcomes of the distribution and things like this. And then I met this guy, Andrea Vindigni, my co-author over 20 years. Then I said, look, I mean, if electoral system have an effect on economic outcomes, on taxes or distributions, they should be endogenous, okay? So economic, they cannot be chosen by people by coincidence. And so we started working on this. And I found that I had ideas and I liked this political economy stuff. And I ended up on this studying religion because that was the process. I mean, and I think I'm not good enough to be an economic historian because when you go to economic history, then you have to be a good economist, but also know history, know political science. You know, you need a big background. So I'm not that good. I'm honest. I don't have some knowledge. Okay, but
now you are a bit deviating.
I'm fascinated. You know, in some papers you find some history. I mean, history stuff. I mean, Andrea is probably the person that likes history very much. I mean, I'm more model oriented. Okay, but that's it.
Well, the important thing is that you did it. No matter what, you're becoming an economic historian can be classified as a jack of all trade. That's the right definition, right? That you need to know a little bit of everything: history, theory, empirical stuff. You need to have knowledge of anthropology, sociology, political science. You put all together, and that's the beauty of it. It's very interdisciplinary. It gets people from all the side. You ended up writing a paper on economic history sooner or later. There's no escape there.
I'll try.
David,
love the paper.
Davide, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Great to see you. And thanks for describing your paper in such lucid terms. Wonderful. And thanks for coming. And I hope we can have you again in the future. And I also hope to see you again face to face before too long.
Hopefully,
yeah? Well, that would be great. And I'm happy to have been here with you. I mean, and I hope this chat would be useful for your students, for example. And I think that the contribution that we should, my contribution is also on the teaching level to convince people to study economics. I mean, for two reasons. First, because when you understand this is a lot of fun. And second, because allows you to understand the world and to do better other jobs.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Davide. Thank you, Sascha, for running the interview. Hope to see Davide maybe in the future for another interview. And I'll see you guys at the next episode.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.